Welcome to the Hawley History Society. Today's presentation is on the history of the Church of St. Nicholas in Charlwood, Surrey, by Brendon Sewill.
Before tonight, and almost got involved in some beautiful young ladies wanted to include me in their line dancing.
And did you?
No, I didn't. I waited there. My wife is parking the car, arriving with some books, I hope. Anyway, I'm Brendon Sewill, and I've lived in Charlwood all my life. Well, actually, that's an exaggeration, because I came to Charlwood in 1933 when I was 3. So I've been there quite a long time. And last autumn, I published a book on the history of Charlwood Church, because I've been chairman or a member of the Fabric Committee looking after the architecture of Charlwood Church for about 30 years. So I've got to know it pretty well. And Charlwood Church, as many of you know, let's put your hands up as how many of you have been to Charlwood Church? Quite a lot, yes. Been inside? Yes? Yes, so you know all about it, so I can't tell you anything really.
Do you want to run the pictures yourself?
Yes, I'll run them myself.
Do them for you.
No? Well, you do them for me, I'll tell you when next.
All right, okay.
Okay, let's have the next one. So, we don't really know when Charlwood Church was built. All we've got is a Norman arch, and Norman arches look like that, and that's an early Norman arch because they were made without decoration, and they were made sometime between the Battle of Hastings and 1100. Now, in the book on Charlwood Church, it was called circa 1080, but people in Charlwood are not very good at Latin, so they translated circa as in 1080. So we've always said the church was built in 1080, but we actually don't know. It was somewhere around that time, and we have no idea why it was built in Charlwood, because Charlwood was a messy, muddy place in those days, like it is now, and no decent railway, nothing to improve the place at all. So let's have the next slide. And so that's what it looked like in 1080. And now where's my little thing for shining on it? I've got one in my pocket in case you haven't got one.
And I've got one, but it does the... You can have this one.
No, I've got my own one. There we are.
Right, okay.
So the Norman arch is there, and we think it was, the tower is up there, and the altar would have been up there. We think it was just a simple construction like that. And next one, please. And it probably looked like that when it was built. That is the Church of St. Botolph's near Bramber in Sussex. It's on the River Adur, and the River Adur got silted up so that it was no longer a port. So the village disappeared, and the church never got improved. So you can imagine Charlwood Church looking like that. Simple tower, simple nave. Next picture, please. And so it remained like that for 200 years until we got to 1280, when we think that it was probably the de Gatwick family, because Charlwood's always had a love-hate relationship with the Gatwick family and with Gatwick in general. And they built on this bit here, and that had an altar there, and it might well have been a chantry chapel, because it was just after, in 1280, it was just after the Crusades had happened, and one of their family might have got killed in a crusade, and they built this chapel to remember him. And on this wall they painted some very fine wall paintings. Next one, please. And that's what the wall paintings look like today. Fairly faded, but you can make out roughly what they look like. And that's a little piscina, which is basically a place for washing up things, washing up the altar vessels, showing that there was an altar at that place. Then next one, please. So in 1993, I got a expert, an art historian, to paint a picture of what the wall paintings would originally have looked like in their original colours. And so on the left is the story of St. Margaret. On the right, the three boys in the tub, and down here are the three skeletons, and there's an archer which we'll come to later. So next, so doing the top level of St. Margaret, she was a very nice girl. She was sitting on a rock, spinning wool or cotton or whatever you did in those days. And along comes this lord. He's out hunting on his horse, but you can see that this is the first picture of a greyhound in England, the only picture of a greyhound in England. I tried to get the Greyhound Association to give us some money, but they declined. And you can see that he's hunting a hare. It looks like a rabbit to me, but it's actually a hare. And so that shows he's a pretty low-class lord, because any decent lord hunted stags, but only scruffy lords hunted hares. And he's got his huntsman behind him blowing a horn, and he's sending his servant on, and he says to Margaret, would you like to go to bed with my lord tonight? Well, the Victorian said, would you like to marry him? And I can't really believe he was quite that patient. And she was a really good girl. She was a Christian, and she said no. She said, no way am I going to bed with your nasty lord. Anyway, he's a low-class lord because he hunts hares. And so, next picture, please. So the Lord has us, here she is, and the Lord has us thrown into prison and beaten up and really bashed about by his people. And so the devil suddenly appears to her, dressed up as a dragon. Now, if any of you happen to meet a dragon in your kitchen when you get up one morning, remember that it's a devil, really, not a dragon. And the dragon says to her, just be a good girl. Why don't you shut your eyes, lie on your back, and do what he wants. Think of England. And she says, no, I'm a good Christian. I won't do any of that sort of thing. And so the devil swallows her up. But luckily for her, there's a hand of God coming down from heaven, up above. So next picture, please. And so down below, she makes a sign of the cross in the devil's tummy. Now, if ever you get swallowed by a devil, remember to make a sign of the cross inside, because she comes out and there's a spear, and she triumphs over the devil. And so but that isn't the end of the story, because she comes out for the judge, and in the actual wall painting he's lost his head, but we think he's the same chap who was out hunting, and he said, you didn't do what I wanted you to, so I'm going to have you executed. And here is the executioner with this great big sword, holding her up by the hair and going to cut her head off. And there is her soul flying up to heaven. Now, isn't that a sad story? So it just proves I don't know sure what improved.
But society has always been misogynistic.
Good girls come to a sticky end in the end. So now, next one, please. Now we come to the other side of the paintings, and this, I remind you again, this is not the actual one. This is the artist, historians' reckoning of what they were like. So now we go to the top half, and we'll look at a larger one. Next one, please. So there are the three boys who were being cooked up for bacon in a tub. And there are the butchers, and they've got their hands together because they've just seen St. Nicholas. But they were really rather wicked butchers because there weren't any health regulations in those days about the content of sausages. So they boil up boys quite nicely to make sausages. And they were pretty far gone in the boiling process. But Nicholas came, and there you can see he's rescuing the boys out of the tub, and there's the hand of God coming up down from up above. So that's a nice story, isn't it? Good chap, St. Nicholas. Let's have the next one. So now we have, this is a fairly famous one. It's called The Three Princes and the Three Skeletons. And there are about 14 other paintings like this, but this is about the best one in England, and this is the only one where the princes are on horses. And you can see that one of the princes has got a hawk on his wrist, and they're all quite grand because they've got crowns on their head, and they're out hunting, and they meet these three skeletons, which is quite a shock for them, really. And the skeletons say, "As you are, we were. As you are, we were. As we are, you will be." So that was quite a shock for the three princes. Now, they had that there for about 200 years, and then the parson of the day got rather tired of preaching sermons on the same subject, so they covered it over with whitewash. Next picture, please. And so they painted a picture on top of it of St. Edmund and the archer. Now, St. Edmund's disappeared, I'm afraid to say, but the story was that in East Anglia, he got tied to a tree, and he was having a battle against the Vikings, which the Vikings won, and the Viking archers shot arrows into him, so that he looked like a thistle with prickles coming out, arrows all over him. So he became a saint and is buried, as you would expect, at Bury St. Edmunds. We got a picture of him, and it's about 1450 or 1480, sometime like that. So now we have to go on a little bit in the history of the church. And oops, you've done two. Go back one, that's him. Now Richard Saunders, he died in 1480, but he was only aged 30, so that was rather sad. But before he died, he'd been quite sensible. He married a rich wife, which was a very good move, and he had produced some children. So next one, please. So the rich wife, who was his widow, had lots of money, so she built on all this bit of the church. That was, you remember, that was the place where the wall paintings were. That was the original church there with the Norman arch there. This bit got added on in 1300 and something. And so rich widow added on all that bit. Don't worry about all the letters. And right, let's have the next one. That was, she built it as a chantry chapel. Now, how many of you are Roman Catholics, before I say anything very rude about it? So you all know about, you Roman Catholics know about purgatory. And this was not the tomb which is there because it's been taken away now, but this is a tomb in a chantry chapel. It happens to be the tomb of Arthur, who was King Henry VIII, elder brother. You all know the story about King Henry VIII and how his brother married Catherine, but then died, and Henry VIII married Catherine. So this is a chantry chapel with a tomb in it where prayers could be said. And now, it was one of the things about the Catholic Church in those days that if you paid a lot to the priests so that they said prayers every day, you got up to heaven more quickly. Now let's have the next picture. Now, can you see that? It's a bit vague, but here's a picture of purgatory, and you've got all these poor people down below suffering agonies because they're being all purged of their sins. That's why it's called purgatory. And up above here is heaven, and the angels are picking out people to be sent up to heaven. So it's a pretty bad place, purgatory, and you need the priest to say lots of prayers for you so that you get out of it quickly. Right, next one. Whoops, two. Go back one.
Sorry.
Now, that was 1480, and quite soon after, 1550, we had the Reformation, which meant the Protestants took over from the Catholics, and the chantry chapel was abolished because the Protestants, following Luther, didn't believe that you could get to heaven more quickly if you paid for it. The good socialists didn't believe in private health service. And all paintings were whitewashed over because the Protestants didn't believe in having pictures of saints. Because I should have told you that the wall paintings were not just art, they were pictures of the saints, and you came in and you prayed to the saints, and the saints helped you. So St. Margaret, who came to the sticky end, if you were, she was the patron saint of women, so if you were having a baby, you came into the church and you prayed to St. Margaret, and she would look after you. So they didn't believe in saints, not pictures of them, so they were whitewashed. Statues, they were demolished. The windows where they had pictures of saints, they were all broken. And the stoop, now you don't know what a stoop is, but it's a stone thing in the porch, which is where the holy water was kept. Because if you've been to France and you know about churches, you know that at the entrance there's a holy water, and you dip your finger in the holy water and it makes you ever so holy. So that was smashed, and it's still there in front of the church. So all those things you can see. Well, you can't see the wall paintings, but you can now. And the chantry chapel, next one please. The only thing which was left of the chantry chapel was the screen, which is fairly magnificent. It's up there, you won't be able to read it. It's a rather smudgy photograph, but it's got RS, 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 RS. That's the initials of Richard Saunders, the rich man who died aged 30, because his widow put all this. Now, actually, this top bit, we don't quite know where it was at all, because it may have been round his tomb, but it was taken away, perhaps because there is an M with a crown on it, and the Protestants really didn't believe in the Virgin Mary being crowned, so they may have taken this top bit all away, but it was put back on top of this screen, and is really very lovely. Now, when the tomb was taken out of this bit, then it was turned into a private chapel for the Saunders, and you have to remember that the altar was still on the other side of the church, and this was a private chapel. So let's have the next one, please. And we go right through, so we've jumped ahead from 1550 to 1860. And this chap, William Burgess, was quite a famous Victorian architect. He would be more famous if he wasn't regularly high on opium, but he happened to be a friend of the rector of Charlwood, who was a chap called Birmingham, and between them they were good historians. So between them they went into the rectory and got a bucket of water and a mop, and they wiped the whitewash off the wall paintings. So they discovered the wall paintings again. I'm not really sure about the bucket and mop because there isn't any record of how they got the whitewash off. They also turned the whole church round. We're very lucky that in many cases Victorians took churches and then knocked most of the church down and rebuilt it. But in Charlwood, instead of knocking it down, they turned it round so that the altar, instead of being on the left, which had been for 500 years, was on the right. And so that was the side with the wall paintings. So right, next one. And so nothing much more happened till 1860. Sorry, till that was 1860. Now we get to 2000 and nothing, year 2000, and we decided that we needed a loo because it was women priests, and for several hundred years we got used to having bishops and such like, and they came down and we took them behind the laurel bushes and said, sorry we haven't got a loo. But once they introduced women's priests, we couldn't use the laurel bushes any longer, so we had to build on a loo, and while we were doing it we decided to build a meeting room and a kitchen. So this is a little meeting room and a loo in there, and that was built on and opened in 2009. So then, right, next one. So there we are now. That's what Charlwood Church looks like. We don't always have the horses grazing in the graveyard. They escaped one day, and I thought it made rather a nice picture. So that is a tower which is built. Oh, the top of the tower. I'll tell you about the top of the tower. That was the tower originally went up to that level, and then in 1660, when Charles II came to the throne, the restoration after the rather boring Puritan time, they raised the tower, put 6 bells up in there, and so you can see the little ridge round there that shows when it was raised in 1660. And this bit is the bit which the rich widow built in 1480. And so there you are. Is there another one? I can't remember. No, that's it. Let's go back one to the horses. Now, sorry I'm a bit out of breath, but that's because I went to the wrong hall to start with. And I have got a good book. It's much more interesting, the book, because it's got all the detail, much more than I've been able to give you this evening. But I'd be very happy if anybody got any questions, except that I'm very deaf these days, so I won't hear them, but you'll be able to tell me what. So what would you like to ask? Yes?
Where's Charlwood Church?
Where is it? In the middle of Charlwood village. Does that make any sense to you? What?
I have never seen it.
You've never seen it? I know, because you drive through Charlwood on your sat-nav, and we see them by the hundreds driving through with their eyes glassed over, and never looking to the left or to the right. But if you look to your left driving through Charlwood, you'll see the church. Right, let's have some more questions. Right at the...
Is the churchyard now as big as it was, as
I,
when the church.
you'll have to translate for me, Doug.
So is the churchyard now as big as it ever was?
No, the churchyard was quite small. It was enlarged in 1920. I have done a calculation that there are about 10,000 people buried in Charlwood churchyard. You can work it out quite easily. If you take the population of a village like Charlwood at about 300, and you reckon there are 3 generations in each 100 years, and it's been around for 1,000 years, you multiply it all out, and it comes out at about 10,000 people buried there. But clay is, without going into gory details, clay is very acidic, and nothing's much left after a few years.
Is the church still open and functioning, Brendon?
The church is certainly functioning. It's open every day, so do go in and have a look anytime, any day. It functions on Sundays, of course, 9:30 church. Its congregation, I'm afraid, is pretty small at present. We haven't got a rector. We couldn't afford a rector, and about 7 years ago we were reduced to having a priest in charge, and now we haven't even got a priest in charge. We're in what's called an interregnum, so that we're waiting for a new rector or vicar or priest in charge to be appointed. But it's very well used for weddings and funerals. Often the church is full for those sort of occasions.
The tree in the churchyard.
The tree in the churchyard.
Yeah, the one that's been burnt out.
Yes, the yew tree in the churchyard. I'm glad you raised it, because we had it dated a few years ago, and it's about 980, so it's about 100 years older than the church. So that it was probably, there was probably a wooden Saxon church there before the present church was built, and the yew tree. And about 20 years ago, some youth were smoking cigarettes inside the hollow tree and set it alight. So we've only got half a yew tree now, but the half is flourishing.
Was there a story about somebody living in there?
Somebody living in the yew tree?
Yeah.
No, I think that's made up.
Oh, is it? Okay.
It's quite interesting that when they had to pay the priest to say prayers to get the chap to heaven, the Saunders family allocated the rent of a farm, one of the farms they happened to own, because they owned a lot of land, and they allocated the rent of the farm to pay the priest. And the farm is still there, and it's called Chanter's Lure, which after 400 years, Chantry Silver becomes Chanter's Lure. So you find Chanter's Lure Farm still there, which is quite nice. How names persist over 400 years.
And have you bought some books this evening, Brendon?
Yes, my wife, who's sitting over there, has got some, and they cost £5 each, but they're cheap at the price, and all the money goes towards the repair of Charlwood Church. So you do very well to buy some. And they give you a much fuller and more accurate and less ramshackle.
So anybody who's interested, please see us immediately afterwards, and you're welcome to a copy. Brendan's got enough for 2 each. Okay, Brendon, thank you very much for that.
I'm sorry for the late start.
Well, we're sorry you had the trouble finding us. I thought.
Well, silly old me, I didn't read your instructions properly.